You know what I mean now by a sense of humor? Every detail of your life is funny. All right, now what if something breaks down? Well, that's the time to look for the joke. In other words, make sure that you're always laughing at everything, and what would appear as a crisis to somebody, you've turned into a joke. Let me give you another illustration. The other day at the ranch, my little boy cut his finger. There was a lot of blood. It wasn't really a bad cut, it just looked serious. And the little boy didn't know whether to think it was bad or whether not, and he didn't know whether to cry or whether not. The foreman walked up. He looked over the situation. He picked up his hand, he looked at it, contemplating. The little boy was looking right in his face, trying to find out what the verdict was going to be, so he would know how to actually act to the situation. And then a smile came across the foreman's face. You see, the foreman knew that the little boy needed comfort. So the foreman said, "Oh, I think you're going to be all right. It's a long ways from your heart." You laugh a little bit at that, but in this particular situation, all my little boy did was the tears disappeared and a smile come on his face. Now that's humor. That is how we help people with humor instead of hurt them. Another use of humor is to help those people that you meet that are in a negative syndrome. For example, if someone's mad, if they're angry, we say that almost invariably they're going to interpret almost any kind of behavior you have as being in contest with them. We call this particular kind of a person a threatened individual. Now, a threatened individual interprets all serious behavior as to be more threatened. In other words, serious behavior means you're not for them. Now, what do you do when you meet someone like this? Well, a joke, a little bit of humor makes them laugh. Then can they be serious? And the very fact that they're laughing ends their fear or their angry feelings. Now, this helps you too because you've avoided a contest, but look, you've also helped somebody who was serious, who was threatened, who was neither mad or angry. You've helped them be happy. I mean, these serious people who are sure that the world's coming apart tomorrow. Well, you know, the best medicine for them is laughter. I've dissolved more people who were upset and were serious by just getting them laughing until they forgot what they were supposed to be serious about. Before they realize that they're happy-go-lucky. In other words, they're carefree. Does this avoid problems? Salesmen do this to you all the time. I mean, here I am getting ready to buy something and I'm real concerned. I don't know whether it's going to work or whether it's the right thing or whether this is the best brand. And the salesman starts laughing and joking. Pretty soon I don't even care. I buy it. A good sense of humor keeps you from being serious. You don't have to worry about seriousness anyway. There's enough people around you to make things as serious as they have to be. There's a tendency for the people around you to become over-concerned and tense, and if you can laugh, you can keep your environment relaxed. Whereas if you can't laugh, then you live in an strained environment. For example, the man came home and he was behind financially. 2 business deals fell through and they were living in real tight money situation. All right, as he comes home, he's laughing, carefree. The children don't feel it, the wife doesn't feel it. In other words, it's a relaxed atmosphere. Another man in the same situation comes home with such a worried expression that the children are sick. You actually get colds from this. And we say that the wife becomes very nervous. In other words, she begins to feel the effects of the pressures because of his seriousness. And by the way, in war, this is a beautiful thing to do, if you can do it. On the front lines, it's just another joke, another ball of wax. If you can turn around and make a joke out of everything in life, then you've solved most of your problems. All right, the next one is I must always be goal-oriented, I must always be fulfilling a function, and I must have a definite purpose in my life. To be actually in orbit without a goal is the definition of death. In other words, you cannot function in this world without some type of goal-oriented behavior. This is illustrated by the widow whose husband dies. She has no purpose, no function, no goal. She's dead in 4 years. The next one, number 10, adaptive behavior. Nature shows us all the time. Take a lizard, moving from one color to another color to another color, he changes colors. And what do I mean by adaptive behavior? Here's a man that's got the finest pair of horses in the county. The harness is polished. He's got the best buggy. He doesn't feel too much of a loss when he switches to a Model T Ford. Now he's got the best Model T Ford in the state. Does he like an automatic transmission? I mean, it doesn't take him 6 years still buying a straight stick. No, in other words, he thinks an automatic transmission is all right. By the way, if you're going to live to 162, you're going to go through many generations, aren't you? Will he be taking flying lessons? Can you see the different kinds of behavior that will be necessary to live a long time? Now, a lot of people shorten their life because they will not accept something until it's a year old. A new car comes out. I don't like that style. They oppose it for a full year. Now, the reason they finally have to accept it is they've got to drive something. And at the end of the year, they can now oppose the new style, and they learn to like the old style. Let's take women's shoes. Some men couldn't stand the open toes. I don't know what's wrong with them. It should be something that they should crave. And then finally they learn to like it, and then they point the toe. Oh no, can't stand those women with those shoes with those pointed toes. He won't let his wife have any of them. About the time he decides they're kind of cute, the style's out, now they're square toes. So he tells his wife, he says, you can have the pointed toes. Now she can't find them anywhere. In other words, what are you doing when you do not adapt? You are robbing yourself, are you not? Now, I've used many illustrations that have been funny, but let me get one close to home, and I'm going to call this one music. It's interesting to me that each generation says that the generation which follows it doesn't know what music is. And after they've made a complete indictment against that generation, then they grow up and turn around and make the same indictment against the next generation. Should you be able to love all kinds of music? In fact, if you become too fanatical, they call you old fogey. This simply means that everything that was wonderful happened 50 years ago. And everything that's happening today is no good. By the way, the world belongs to the youth. Did you know that? If you're going to live to 162, you're going to have to get in the same crowd as the youth are. And you're going to have to belong to the crowd that owns the world. You're going to have to adapt your behavior. Thinking of a gentleman who was on a cruise around the world. He was in his 80s and he was on his honeymoon. This in itself was unique. He had a lovely bride. By the way, on his trip around the world, he was going on the inland passage to Alaska, and a friend of mine was just going from Seattle over to Vancouver, and he happened to be on the same boat. This man had fascinated him to no end, but then all at once the man looked at his watch. It was a certain time. He went in and got his books. Come out and sat on the deck and started studying. The curiosity got the best of my friend, so he kind of moseyed over and looked over his shoulder to find out what could... In other words, there must be some secrets he's learning to have a nice, beautiful bride and be in his 80s and making a tour around the world. And the book he was studying was differential calculus. So there's something wrong with this guy. So he's standing there and he started talking to his bride. Pretty soon the man heard the conversation. He joined in. The three of them were talking. He says, "What are you studying the calculus for?" He says, "I'm taking an extension course from LaSalle University." He says, "Why on earth for? Are you going to use it in some kind of work you're going to do?" "No," he says, "I can't relate this to my profession at all." He says, "I'm just fascinated with calculus." So the fact that they can actually study different shapes and come up with these conclusions, he says, is marvelous. Whereas he was studying for the sheer joy of learning. Can you visualize this kind of a human being? That's probably the reason the girl was in love with him. He was fascinating. Was he old? Of course not. It reminds me of this one gentleman. He was looking for a home. He was in his 80s. The real estate lady was telling him about the particular piece of property. And she evidently misjudged him completely, because he finally had to ask her the most important question: how close is it to the nearest school? Number 11. Variety. Variety is best described as interests. The more interests I have, the more variety I have, and if I have continued interest, I have what I call the magic ingredient of life called sustained enthusiasm. Sustained enthusiasm simply means that I have many interests. I'll actually draw it on the board for you. Here's an interest this week, one next week, one the following week. If you should come over to visit me and I'm in my area of my interest, I feel great. During the week, I'm low, high, low, high. So I have three interests at point A, B, and C. All I have to do is double my interests. I'm going to do what? Put one in the middle of the week. So I'll call this D and D. Now watch the curve. My lows are not so low, are they? But you know, you still don't want to come over and see me. Why? You might visit me at one of my low points, and that would ruin your whole week. So you stay away. All right, what if I add another interest? Watch what happens as I keep adding interests. Eventually, you like to be around me? I'll tell you what enthusiasm is. Enthusiasm is an ingredient that you've got more than you need. This is a basic definition of it. Now, the reason I have more than I need is because it bubbles over. Then why do you want to be around me if I'm enthusiastic? You don't realize it, but it's a sponge effect, isn't it? In other words, you want to be there to get whatever spills. So we say then that if I have sustained enthusiasm, am I always bubbling over? Would you like to compare this to a popcorn popper? And by the way, I'm assuming that the kind of popcorn we have doesn't have any old mates. Now it's interesting, you hold it, and all at once slice ready to go for you. Why? Because it's almost time for a kernel to pop. That's my first interest. Now when I really get going, can you hear it? Now an interesting thing, if I got a whole popper full of corn, could I have two kernels pop at once? Now you're talking about the highlights of life. Could I have three at once? By the way, you can have so many of them going for you. Do you really care if there's any old maids in the bottom of the pan? You wouldn't even know it anyway, would you? It's almost invariably going to be true that sometime in life will something not pan out for you. I mean, this happens. But if I have so many kernels popping, do I care? I've actually had a day when something happened that would be enough for a normal person to ruin their whole week. But by the end of the day, I don't even know what happened. And I could care less. Why? So many wonderful things have happened to me that day that I'm just thinking back of all the good things. Then I had a piece of property and I was trying to sell it and money was tight. The man came over and offered me $5,000 cash down. I was thrilled. Just about the time I was to take his money, the phone rang. The foreman at the ranch said, "You just had a beautiful white filly born, 2 weeks early, by the way." Was I expecting that? No. Now, did that give me more of a thrill to have both of them happen at once? Now you know the secret of sustained enthusiasm. Now, I believe in building into your life expectancies. I'll give you an illustration. I've got a beautiful Arabian mare. This particular horse, I believe, is the prettiest mare on earth. I'm a little prejudiced. Not much, though. We're going to go to the Nationals this summer and prove it. Right now, this horse right now is at Daydream Ranch being bred to one of the Arabian stallions that was ranked number 4th in the world this year. Beautiful animal. Just a perfect horse. Now, what do you suppose I'm thinking about when I think of 11 months and 11 days from now? If I talk about this much longer, you'd be out on my ranch 11 months and 11 days because you'll want to see what? I mean, Is this more excitement than just an ordinary birth? I mean, we've got the best mare on earth, we've got the best stallion on earth, and we're going to have the best foal on earth. Do we know what color it's going to be? Do I have many expectancies awaiting this? The other day I was talking, my wife says, you know, I just can't help it. I just keep getting excited all the time about it. She's got a whole year to go yet. Now, should you have hundreds of these things in your life? The other night I came home from the seminar, and I thought I'd had enough thrills for any normal human that day. And you know, I didn't even go to bed that night till 3 o'clock in the morning. We had the most beautiful 12 puppies born. Just darling puppies. They're still out there in the lawn playing. They're almost 2 months old now. Oh, and you should see the 2-year-old play with them. And he's in heaven now. He's got 12 puppies. They're all his. He calls them all mine. He's their caretaker, their guardian. Are you beginning to see what I mean by expectancies, interests? Now compare this with the lady who's 70 and she's got one interest left. And they'll tell you, I'm living only for my daughter. Or maybe it's a grandchild. Now, their eggs are all in one basket. Could something happen? All right, all it takes is for that one thing that they're living for to be destroyed, and are they destroyed? It's that simple. I'm thinking of a friend of mine. When he went to the University of Oregon for his master's degree, he purchased a home and remodeled it and was going to sell it and make money. He'd wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat over the payments. Finally, he was teaching down at Long Beach State College, and he'd bought his first apartment house. One night he woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. The payments. You know, he got so disgusted, the next morning he said, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to sell it and forget it, or buy a dozen more. He went out and bought a dozen more. Now he sleeps like a baby all night long. Might he lose one of the dozen? Of course he's going to. I mean, it's in the odds. But does he worry about it? Not at all. He got them all under separate corporations. And by the way, if 9 of his apartment houses make it and one goes down the drain, is he rich? All right, let me tell you what happened. He started in 1959 with $1,500. Today he's a millionaire. And he hasn't lost any more sleep. Are you beginning to see what I mean by having a variety of interests in many things? In fact, if I were to actually list for you hobbies of mine, we could stay here till the sun comes up the next morning. You say, well, how do you do them all? I don't. Whatever I get a whim for, I do next, though. Never believe that you're going to actually captivate everything on earth in your life anyway, because you're not. It's too big a world and it's too wonderful. I believe in the butterfly technique. I go from one thing to another. In other words, I have a variety of interests. All right, let's go to the next one. Relaxation. One of the shortcuts to a premature death is to have tension. Anytime you are suffering from actual tension in your body, your life is being just cut right off. I could list famous people tonight by the hundreds that have been killed from tension. Now, it doesn't list in the newspaper that so-and-so died from tension. It says so-and-so died from a stroke. So-and-so died because their kidneys went out, or they died from a heart attack. But the cause is that tension will cause your weakest organ to go out, and it will kill you. You're made to live relaxed, carefree, happy-go-lucky, or else you die. This evening I want to conquer, and I want to work with you while you conquer, the second largest problem in the United States. Now, some people think it's the largest problem, and there's a close second, and I don't know which is really first or which is second, but when I examine both of the problems, I find out that they cause each other. Some people feel like frigidity in American women is our biggest problem, and other people feel like tension is our biggest problem. They're very interrelated. Tonight, we're going to take tension. If we were to examine billions and billions of American dollars tonight that are spent in drugstores for a chemical approach to solve a problem, and when I say billions, it's a mild sum because the greatest expenditure in the United States today is for chemicals to fight tension. Now we're talking about nicotine, caffeine, all the narcotics, all the aspirin families, all the alcohol. In other words, we are actually a billion-dollar economy in chemicals to help our people keep from screaming. In other words, they have headaches, backaches, neck aches, stomach aches, all these problems, and these problems all arise from one major factor: we haven't learned the secret of living. In other words, we haven't learned to live relaxed. Now, to solve the problem, all I want to do tonight is give you causes and cures. I'll go right down the list. I'm going to leave the problem right in your lap when we leave it. I'm sure everybody knows what we're talking about. I'm sure everybody here in this room right now has had the bout with this problem within the last week. That's how prevalent it is. It's no secret what we're discussing. I could ask for you to raise your hands. How many have taken some form of antacids, some form of tranquilizers, some form of nicotine, some barbiturates, any of the 100 of the aspirin family? I could go right down the list, and I might even do it this way. Is there anyone here in the past week who has not taken one of the chemical family? Let me see your hands. We are all partakers of these chemicals. And by the way, it's a shame to spend all your money this way. Could you imagine what an economy such as the United States could do if we could move the funds that are flowing in this direction in the recreational areas of our life? Why, everybody in the world would look at our country and say they're nothing but playboys and playgirls. We'd be having fun all day long. In other words, wouldn't it be nice to solve the problem so that you could live completely relaxed without ever having a stiff neck, backache, headache, or any type of alkaline or acid stomach again? All right, I like to go through what I call causes. Now, this is an interesting approach because when you use the chemicals, do you know the cause? This is fascinating because when I use the chemicals, I not only not know the cause, I cover the cause up. Number one cause tonight, fatigue. A girl types at a desk at the wrong position or too long of hours. And yet have I found a single secretary's desk that does not have a family of the aspirins in the drawer. Why does she take them? Because she's suffering pain. Does she know why? No. Does her boss know that the typewriter's in the wrong position? Some people drive a car until either the gas tank is empty or they need a hamburger. And they wonder why they suffer. In other words, anytime you do any particular type of work over an extended period of time, longer than 50 minutes, then you are due for fatigue, and fatigue will cause tension. Now remember, when you are faced with tension, you're reduced to actual machinery. In other words, for you to do anything beyond a routine function under tension is impossible. The next one is lack of sleep. In other words, we find that there are important things to do all night, and we keep doing them. And then we find out the next day we're not able to do the things that we have to do. Most American jobs, most occupations are structured, by the way, so that you only have to put 25% of your actual efforts to actually succeed anyway. So could you stay up all night and still fulfill the requirements of most jobs? I mean, it's possible. I mean, you're there, you're warm, and you push the buttons at about the right time, and you went home approximately the right time, and no one knows the difference. In other words, most jobs do not tax you to the limits of your creativeness so that no one knows whether you're really up to par or not. The next one is lack of food. This doesn't mean your stomach's full. This means that you haven't taken the proper nutrients into your stomach. So we're saying then lack of good food will cause tension. The next one is fear. And I've read in some books, and many authors believe this is the number one cause of tension.
fear of pregnancy, fear of bankruptcy, fear of disaster, disgrace. Can you go on and on? All the fears. What will people think? What will people say? How can I possibly survive if this happens? In other words, a constant battle of fear. Every time you have fear, you've got a tight back, a tight neck, and you've changed your body chemistry to negative. The next one is conflict. You love her and you hate her. You don't know for sure why each. You've got a certain idea and you don't know whether it's right or whether it's wrong. There's a certain place you should go, but there's a dozen reasons why you don't want to. Now, why don't you just examine your life? Do you have conflicts? In other words, do you have opposite feelings toward the same object? Now, you can afford a couple of these and survive without being committed, but if you get very many of these in your life, your energy is gone. By the way, we should define that you are created with enough energy to keep you going 16 hours a day, bubbling over. This is the way we're made. If you are anything short of this, we say you have energy leaks. And your energy leaks are caused from emotional problems. When you are sleeping more than 8 hours, or when you wake up tireder than when you went to bed, I think it's time to examine what kind of warfare is going on in your life that's using up all of your energy supply. Have you ever heard the expression, they ask the husband to do some work about the yard and suddenly he's so tired, he's got to go to bed for 3 months? Fatigue and tiredness are always the result of conflict. All right, let's take one more, stress. Your environment changes, your plans change, something else comes up. And the minute you run into stress, you run into fatigue, you run into exhaustion, you run into tension. The next one is the fact that you exercise so seldom that when you do exercise, you overdo it. I've had several cases, one attempted suicide just because of exercise. I had one gentleman who was in a mental institution, had been committed 5 different times, had 20 shock treatments. And I had worked with him for a year and we had him progressing beautifully. And one day he calls me up and tells me he needs to be committed. And you know what had happened? He had watched a television program of Mr. Universe. And he had seen some beautiful muscles. And he had changed his schedule. I had him swimming a half an hour every day at the Y. He had changed his swimming to weightlifting. The weightlifting had knotted the muscles in the back of his neck, which had tied up his head in knots, which had thrown him into discouragement. He didn't know which way was up. All we did was triple his tranquilizers for 3 days until we could get the muscles worked out and told him that he couldn't weight lift anymore. Another lady who had attempted suicide because her husband had left her. 6 months later, she was progressing beautifully. The 4th of July came up and she dreaded it, because she would be alone, there would be no one to have any companionship with. So she decided to kill the day with hard work, and she trimmed a hedge with this kind of action. You should try that for 6 hours. She called me up 4th of July and told me that everything we had done for 6 months was wasted, that she was going to kill herself. And I told her, well, I can't believe it. Progress has been too beautiful. I said, what is basically wrong? She said, it's just black. Everything is just black. I just can't think. And I tried to find out if she'd done anything different. She told me, no, I haven't done anything different. I knew that she had, and as I kept talking to her, pretty soon she told me what she had done all day. And I told her, in 3 days you'll feel great again. All you've done is tighten up your back muscles, which has tightened up your neck muscles, which has tightened up your head, which has caused you to go into depression.